or said to yourself, if something doesn't give around here soon, I will. Or I wish life could be simpler. I'm not talking about life lived by the pool. I'm not talking about living at the beach the rest of your life. But have you ever thought, my life is moving at a pace I can't sustain? Or worse, you've gotten accustomed to the speed of your life, but you know you're running too fast. You've just gotten used to running too fast, and you're afraid of where it's going to lead. And I wonder how many of us have even had a New Year's resolution that reflected the need to simplify or just declutter. I've got to get rid of some things in my life. Because my guess is that even now as we go into the fall and we're past the summer schedule and we're getting accustomed to our new schedules with the fall and all of the fall activities, somebody is already looking at their calendar and they're saying to themselves, yeah, this isn't going to work, right? I mean, you've already looked into the fall, or you had this bad feeling that you are going to, you'll get to the end of it, and then you're going to fall in a heap because of all the activities that are already scheduled for the fall. Listen, all you have to do is check out your favorite magazines, books, go online to websites devoted to simplifying your life, and what you're going to find out is there are an awful lot of people who sense this need to simplify, to tone it down a bit, less stressful. What they're looking for is a more meaningful life. I love what Bill Hybels said, and the first part of the quote is on your notes, but he said, simplified living is more than doing less. So I want to make sure you catch that. It's more than just doing less. It's being who God called us to be with a wholehearted, single-minded focus. It's actually walking away from innumerable lesser opportunities in favor of the few to which we've been called and for which we've been created. It's this lifestyle. It's this lifestyle that allows us, when our heads hit the pillow at night, that we can reflect with gratitude that our day was well invested and that the varied responsibilities of our lives are in order. That's what it means to live a simplified life. And here's why this is so important for us to talk about. It's because there's this danger that if we don't change how we live, our overcomplicated world will begin to feel frighteningly normal. This is the way it's supposed to be, evidently, because I can't seem to get out of it. Listen, we'll become accustomed to life at a frantic pace, and we begin to lose the ability to discriminate between those things that are really important and those things that are totally unessential in our lives. When I was in college, I read a book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And in it, he wrote this, it's on your notes. In contemporary society, our adversary majors in three things: noise, hurry, and crowds. If he can keep us engaged in muchness and manyness, he will rest satisfied. And I wonder, for how many of us, or someone we know, listen, that's how you would describe your life. Muchness and manyness is what your life is all about right now. If you want a simpler life anchored by priorities that matter the most, I just want to say to you this morning, roll up your sleeves and get ready to work, because untangling yourself from the overscheduled life that you currently have is not going to be easy, but it's totally worth it. And you need to know this isn't anything new, by the way. It's not a 21st century American phenomenon that no one else has experienced ever before. Jesus actually talks to his good friends about this. So check out how this played out. This is Luke chapter 10. It begins in verse 38. Jesus and his disciples were on their way, and he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, it says that they were on their way, probably on their way to Jerusalem, and the town that they've come to is Bethany, which is about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, and he has some friends who live there, Mary and Martha and their sister, or their brother, Lazarus. Now, you may know the name Lazarus because later in Jesus' ministry, Lazarus dies, and Jesus brings him back to life. That's where he is. He's at their house. And so Mary and her sister, Martha, listen, they open up the home. He stops by for a visit, and I want you to notice these last two words. They open up their home to him. Quite likely, the apostles have gone on into Jerusalem, and so it's just Jesus who has stopped at the house and is visiting with his good friends, and Martha has opened up her home to him. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made, and she came to Jesus and asked, Lord, don't you care that Do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Listen, tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Really, only one. Mary has chosen what is best, and it will not be taken away from her. So Jesus arrives for a visit, and Mary sits at Jesus' feet to hear the latest of his ministry. Martha, on the other hand, goes into Jesus is here mode, right? And to be fair, if Jesus came to your house, you would most likely, would you not go into Jesus is here mode? If he can, you would straighten things up, you would pick things up a bit, you'd put out some fresh towels, maybe put a couple of Bibles in a few rooms and open them up so they look like you've been reading them. And in that day, you would feed your guests. And I picture Martha, that's what she's doing here, but she's not opening a bag of chips. She's not unwrapping some Oreos. She's the type of person who, when she does something, she does something. The problem isn't that she's doing something. The problem is she's doing it by herself. And she took it for about as long as she could take it, and she slams the cupboard door. She's just standing there shaking her head, and she stomps into the living room because she is about to let both of them have it. Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. And I don't know how you see her. I see a hair stranded down the middle of her face. There's a smudge of dough on her nose. She's got an apron over her dress to protect her. She's got fire in her eyes. She's got one hand on a hip, and she's got the other one held with a wooden spoon, right? And she is talking to them. And notice, she doesn't ask for Mary's help. She's way too angry to talk directly to her sister. She doesn't even call Mary by name. She just demands that Jesus sends my sister, who, by the way, is sitting right here. She's right there. Send my sister in to help me. And he can tell she's overwhelmed, and he can tell she's overscheduled, and he can tell that she's exhausted. Words, by the way, that could describe your life, maybe this past week. And maybe you already know for the week coming up, right? And he invites her to put the spoon down and to take a couple of breaths. And Jesus says, in the New Living Translation, it says, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. Really, there's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it. And no, I won't take it away from her." Not exactly what Martha was hoping to hear. And it's not like she was doing something evil. She just wanted to make Jesus a home-cooked meal. The problem was that Martha let the good things, these good things that she wanted to do, she was letting the good things get in the way of what was best. So, since Jesus is saying it, it has to be right? Jesus is saying it. So it has to be right. The problem is you get Martha. You understand Martha in this situation. There are probably people who are in this room right now whose lives are like that all the time. And the demands and the pressures of all the things that you're involved in, they never stop. They never let up. And you know what happens to people who get caught in that doom loop? They run out of time to be compassionate. They don't have time to be compassionate. And they're not looking to slow their own life down. And if they can't slow themselves down, they're going to speed you up, right? They're not trying to rein it in now. They want to ramp you up. And it's not until you hit the wall that many people ask, "Oh my gosh, what happened to me? How did I become this overwhelmed, overscheduled, exhausted person? And I'm angry with everyone all the time. How did I get to this place in my life?" Or you realize that you're being driven into the ground, and you're afraid that when you hit the ground, you are never going to be able to get back up again. And Jesus said to Martha, so many things are occupying your mind right now. They are churning you up inside. You are making my visit, and you're making my visit way more complicated than I wanted it to be. I don't know if you've ever wondered if Jesus would say that to you about your life. Listen, the way you're living your life is just way more complicated than what I want for you. This kind of living isn't coming from me. I'm not the one driving that. Something else is. I don't know that I will ever forget talking to Sandy, and this was a little over 15 years ago. It was 2001. We were living in Columbus, and I had developed some bad work habits. 7 days a week, running as fast as I could most days, and some of you know what that's like because you've been there or you are there right now. And I came home one night and I said, if something doesn't change, I will not be in the ministry in 5 years. There won't be anything left of me to be in ministry. I don't know what I'll do in 5 years. I mean, it was a terrifying moment for me to realize that the thing I loved doing and felt called by God to do, the way I was doing it was depleting me, and in the process was damaging my marriage and my family. On your notes, Thomas Kempis said this: purity and simplicity are the two wings with which man soars above the earth and all temporary nature. Some of us understand what empty feels like and how it can cause you to respond poorly to other people. And the question is, how do we get out of that speed of life? What allows us to get beyond that? I just want to say, I said it earlier, I'm going to tell you one more time, it's not easy. The process is not easy, and it requires brutal honesty on your part. So really, here's a couple of questions you need to ask yourself. How depleted are you right now? You don't have to confess that in front of anybody here this morning, but I'd sure like you to think about it, and maybe even to take that question home with you. How long has it been since you felt fully replenished? How long has it been since your bucket was full? Has it been a month? Was it last year? Do you remember the last time that you felt like your bucket was full? Listen, when you decide that you never want to live on empty again, and maybe right now you're beginning to think, gosh, I don't know. But it sure sounds like the place I want to get to. And when you make that decision, you start paying attention to the things that actually fill your bucket back up. And that's what we want to talk about this morning. If you choose to live your life with more energy reserves, let me tell you this, you're going to disappoint some people. Because you've been saying yes to some things you should have been saying no to. And when you say no to them, they're going to be very disappointed in you. And you are going to have to fight to keep your life replenished, because no one is going to keep your tank full for you. It is up to you to make sure that it happens. So the question is, what sort of things fill your bucket for you? What is it that refuels you? What activities or what engagements restore your energy levels? What relationships do you have that inspire you? What do you read that gives you a better perspective? What in your life is actually a bucket filler rather than a bucket drainer for you? Because when your tank is empty, you have nothing to offer anyone. You cannot give them what you do not have. And this is not about selfish entertainment, although it's going to be called that. It is vital to how you live your life at its best. By the way God intended it to be lived. So you have to be unapologetic about it. You have to prioritize. And you need to protect those things that replenish your bucket, that fill your bucket back up, because it's your responsibility to fill your bucket. It's not your boss's responsibility, not the church's responsibility. It's not your spouse's responsibility. It's yours. It's your responsibility to take care of your own bucket, to make sure it's filled, and to identify what will take it from a depleted state or wherever you are to fill it back up again. And so that's what I want to talk about for the rest of the morning, is just 5 areas you want to make sure you pay very close attention to. I know I pay very close attention to these things. Here's the first one. If you want to make sure that you're replenished, you connect with God. And I know that sounds like something a preacher should say. And it's not first because I'm a preacher and I should say that. It's first because it's first. It's foundational. And I want to make sure that nobody misunderstands what I'm saying about Mary and Martha, by the way. Looking back at our story, I'm not saying that you should quit everything you're doing so that you can just sit and worship and learn all the time. I am not saying that. Well, look at the verses. Isn't that what Mary just did? No, it's not what Mary just did. Mary had withdrawn herself on this specific occasion from her regular duties to be with Jesus. As a matter of fact, if you look at verse 40, the word translated left means to go away from. She left something she was doing. Mary stopped and went to listen to Jesus. She's the balance of Martha, not the opposite of Martha. She's the balance. She's the middle. The opposite of Martha are those who do nothing. They sit around, they listen, they sing, they soak it up, and they head home and they do nothing with it. And honestly, that's why some people become Marthas in the church, because they're trying to make up for the people who don't do anything at the church. So maybe while we're doing some soul searching here this morning to see if we're too busy, some of us need to ask, am I doing anything at all for the sake of the kingdom, or do I just go to church, right? It's not enough to just sit at Jesus' feet. Soapbox away. So, maybe this morning the point is being with God and tuning into Him and walking with Him helps us live a simplified life. It's interesting to me what we find out about Jesus and His life here in Matthew chapter 1 when He's being born. We find out His name. They're going to call Him Emmanuel because that means what? God with us. Isn't that interesting? That's his name means God's going to be with us. And when we look at how He does ministry, and Mark chapter 3 tells us about when He chooses the 12 apostles and He designated them so that they could be what? With Him. He wanted that. That's the first thing, not just so He could send them out to preach. First, they had to be with Him. And it's interesting to me that when you look at Jesus' ministry, the very last thing He says to us, right? He's about literally to hop on a cloud and head home. And in Matthew 28, He says, listen, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to obey everything that I've commanded you, and surely I am with you. Wow. It's what His name means when He's born. It's what He does in His ministry. It's the last thing He tells us before He left. And then when we look at what heaven is like, when we read John's description of heaven in the book of Revelation, look what it says. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. There's something about being with God that is so important that it was talked about before Jesus arrived. He did it while He was here. He made sure we knew it before He left. And when we look forward to the place that we're going to forever, that's how it's described. It's a place where we get to be with God. Listen, there's something about being with God that recalibrates our hearts. It filters out the other voices and the other noises that want my attention. And we need to spend time with God every day. There's just something powerful about it. It is the antidote to a life that is too full. Because once you begin to listen to His voice, other voices, you recognize what they're trying to do and say to you when they contradict what Jesus' voice is saying to you. So that's the first area. Here's the second area. It's your family. If I'm too busy for my own children and grandchildren, I'm too busy. They ought to be a big part of my life, and I want to be a big part of theirs. To that end, I had my granddaughter watching the game yesterday, trying to teach her the right stuff. And I may have mentioned this story to you before. I've talked to our staff about it multiple times. My son Joshua was in a ministry class in college, and he was to turn in a paper on Monday morning where he had interviewed a pastor. And since it was 10 o'clock Sunday night and the paper was due the next morning, he called me. And he asked me all these questions about ministry and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And at the end of it, I thought, this is one of those times I'm going to ask him a couple of questions. I said, so tell me, one of the questions I asked him, tell me what your opinion was of my day off. And there was this quiet. And he said, well, honestly, Casey and I knew it was a joke, because at some point you were going to end up back at the office. And I will tell you, that hurt quite a bit to hear from my son. So I will tell you, fight for your family. And if you did not get it right the first time, at least not the way you wanted to, sometimes God gives you grandchildren so you get a second chance to do it right. And they can light up your life the way God intended children to do. Take advantage of it. Number 3, third area, satisfying work. Not just work, satisfying work. Listen, Solomon said it this way. He said, it is good and proper. He said, take good care of yourself, have a good time, make the most of whatever job you have. As long as God gives you, make the most of whatever job, enjoy it. Listen, life is short. If your job sucks the life out of you, week after week, year after year, you're never going to get your bucket filled up. I have a friend who does not like his job. He hates going to work every day. Every day. I can't even imagine what that's like. I don't want to imagine what that's like. Because God loves you. He loves you. He loves you. He doesn't want your job to be horrible for you. He's your dad. He loves you. He wants you to enjoy labor. It's a gift from him. And he wants that to be a bucket filler, not a bucket drainer. Here's the next one, recreation. Recreation means to recreate energy in your life. What is it that you do that is recreation for you? It's just fun. It just gets your motor going. Here's the next one, exercise. Few of us get the exercise that we really need to stay healthy. And I don't know what you do. I just want to say a brisk sit on the sofa is not exercise. I mean, you may be watching American Ninja Warrior, right? And you get all worked up just watching them. Maybe it leaves you huffing and puffing watching those guys. Man, that is not the thing. I enjoy running. I enjoy resistance training 6 days a week. I'm doing one or the other of those. Sandy loves bike riding. I like doing that with her. Find what you enjoy. Paul, when he's writing to Timothy, would say to him, train yourself to be godly. Physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promises for both the present life and the life to come. And just to be real clear, this passage is about spiritual training. Don't miss that. That's the most important thing. But what Paul does say is physical training does have some value. We need to not miss that. We need to take advantage of that. Figure out what you love doing. Figure out the best time to do it, and then do it. It's not easy. Listen, when we talk about our next step in our relationship with Jesus when it comes to this, here's the first thing I want you to do, and maybe you can do it right now, or maybe you need to think about this. On your notes, do you see that bucket? Okay, there's no need to look at me. The bucket's not up here. The bucket's on your notes. Take a look at the bucket on your notes. Put a line to mark where you feel your energy level is right now. You don't have to do it at this moment, but you might want to. Be realistic about it. Recognize where you are at this moment. Here's the second next step, and it's for everybody. Design your replenishment plan. Those things we just talked about. And it will look differently for everyone in this room. We're not the same in that way. And here's what I know. I know someone in this room is thinking to themselves right now, are you crazy? Mike, you are nuts. I don't have time for what I'm already doing, and now you're trying to shove things into my schedule that are going to make me rest. Are you kidding me? Here's what I want to say. Draw up the plan. Don't worry about how you're going to get those into your current schedule. Just figure out what they look like for right now. We'll get them into your schedule next week, which, by the way, is my teaser to get you back next week. Because I am going to show you this, and I will tell you this, there are no shortcuts. Change begins with small daily steps. Start today, and we'll make it happen. You know, one of the things designed to be a bucket filler in your life is relationships with other Christ followers. And we said last month that if you signed up to be in a small group, that by today, if you signed up to be in a small group by today, that you would be entered into what some of us consider bucket filling activities, two tickets to an OSU game. And so Adam Leopard has come out because He's got the deal. So we're hoping that this becomes a bucket filler for you and a friend, correct?
Sure.
All right.